everyone, welcome once again to Spider-Man Page by Page. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
And we are finally back talking about Spider-Man, looking at every single page of every issue, at least of the Stan Lee run. We'll see how far we end up getting, Dan, but we're gonna show you and talk about every page. And today, we're doing The Amazing Spider-Man number 2, because we're doing it in sequence, and 2 comes after 1. And
that is true.
We are talking today about one of Dan's favorite villains, who a lot of people don't like, and he's going to tell us why. It's the Vulture.
Yeah, I think the Vulture is a highly underrated Spider-Man villain. A lot of people like to pick on the Vulture because he's just kind of really goofy looking. A lot of the early villains are goofy looking, but they've gotten updates and things like that, and specifically updates that people have read and are really good. I think the best Vulture stories just happen to be in, J.M. DeMatteis's run on Spectacular Spider-Man in the 90s, which no one was reading after Kraven's Last Hunt. No one goes back and reads that stuff other than Kraven's Last Hunt. And some people have read like The Death of Harry because he did that too. But there's some really great Vulture stories out there, and I like him a lot. And we'll talk about a little bit more as we go along. He's not really well defined as a character here, but I think he's got some good parallels with Peter Parker. People do some cool stuff with him later.
Yeah, he's a little generic here. Here it's more just the novelty of, oh, look, he's flying, and we're all confused because it's the 60s, and we're all super innocent about things, and the idea of a person being able to fly seems impossible!
Yeah. No, I can't deny that he's sort of two-dimensional here. Not even sort of, he is two-dimensional.
Yeah, but hey, the Chameleon was too.
That's true, yeah.
I mean, and Doc Ock, kind of.
Yeah, as we'll see with the next appearance, he's got a little bit of that going on. But Doc Ock gets more development and becomes more interesting within this run. The Vulture definitely doesn't have.
Well, and to be fair, at least when we get, I know I'm jumping ahead, at least when we get to Doc Ock, we immediately get, if memory serves, don't we immediately get an origin, and we're at least telling you
that is true.
Where it came from. Like, with these characters, it's just, Peter Parker needs somebody to fight.
Yeah, and even the first appearance of the Green Goblin, he's kind of generic, too, because we don't know anything about that guy. I know he's a mystery up until Amazing 38, so...
I love that point you made about the costume, though. The Vulture kind of looks like this for a long, long time, and a lot of characters got updates.
That's true. Like, Dr. Octopus doesn't really wear his yellow and green jumpsuit anymore. He kind of adopted the Spider-Man 2 trench coat kind of look for a while, and... the Vulture, they tried to update him, I forget what year it was, during Mark Millar's run on Marvel Knights Spider-Man. There was a black costume that the Vulture had, and he's probably had a few in between there. But
wasn't it like, was that the one that was like kind of mechanical?
Yes, it was kind of mechanical looking. It was black and red, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And I think there was another one during when Slott and Wade and a bunch of those guys were doing the rotating team, and Amazing came out 3 times a month. Anyway, yeah. But this is the kind of the most well remembered look for the Vulture for sure.
I think certain villains, like, their motif is just so cool and different to people that they can get away with this with the goofy colors even. Like Doc Ock was just, the arms are foreboding. It doesn't matter if he's got a silly like yellow and green color scheme. You had those clashing colors in the in the Spider-Man 90s cartoon, and the way those tentacles move and stuff. It doesn't matter that he's got a silly color scheme. It's kind of scary.
That's true. And the Green Goblin's costume is pretty goofy looking. He's got like an elf hat and little elf boots and that are purple.
Yeah, but he's scary and he's got a psychological thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's go ahead and start talking about it. So we're talking about the Vulture a lot because that's the first part of the story, but reviewing these initial issues is a lot like reviewing 2,
right?
Because each issue has 2 really short stories, and there was more stuff going on between the 2 stories we did last time. This one is kind of 2 totally separate stories that I feel like could kind of take place almost any time.
Yeah, this issue doesn't have as much of a sense of continuity as the last one. I did like that they got rid of having like part 2 in the middle of one of the stories, like we did for the first issue.
Let's not feel the need to stop every 3 pages.
Yeah, remember what happened 3 pages ago, guys?
Yeah. You haven't read this. You slept 4 times since you read these 3 pages. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into it. So, Amazing Spider-Man number 2, we get our full-page spread again. We really like opening these like this.
Oh, yeah, that's a beautiful Ditko pin-up there of him grabbing the Vulture. Great art.
It's awesome. We like to make a lot of grandiose statements in this book where it's like the most colorful superhero of all, Spider-Man. I'm like, well, he's got the same color scheme as Superman.
Yeah, Stan Lee's bombast almost sells itself, right? Like you feel like he's overcompensating a little bit, and he's being like, "You're gonna buy this because it's the coolest thing ever," you know?
Look how awesome! Yeah, and you're like, no, I agree with you. Now, if it came with that voice saying that, that'd be okay. That'd be awesome. So I've been making this point a lot, but we are still in a place where Spider-Man has barely been a superhero.
That's very true. He kind of brings up in this issue becoming a costumed adventurer, not even the word superhero. So I guess he's sort of becoming more comfortable with the idea of going out and doing things in a costume, but he's not specifically going out to even fight crime yet. He goes out here to take photos for personal gain so he can pay his bills.
That's it. It is still about it's still about his personal problems.
Exactly. Yes, and I kind of wish that we did a little bit with the Vulture in this story with his personal problems, because the good stories of the Vulture do exactly that we see later on. The story that I'm thinking of specifically is a story in J.M. DeMatteis's run, where he casts the Vulture as sort of a guy that has no place in society because he's this old man and he's dying of cancer in the story. He's about to die. And they parallel him a little bit with Aunt May because she's sick at the time. And he's sort of a guy that didn't have any place, sort of like Peter Parker is in the early days. Like, nobody really likes him because he's weird and he doesn't have the same interests as other people. And the Vulture is kind of the same way. He's kind of, he doesn't have any friends or family that really care about him. And that drives him to be a supervillain and view people as everyone else as the enemy because nobody treated him well, and it parallels him with early Peter Parker at least really well. And I like that version of the character, but there's not really all that much done with him here. He's just kind of a greedy guy that wants a diamond,
Yeah, when you look, and interestingly, throughout Spider-Man lore, there's a lot of stuff about mortality and getting old and older people trying to get young, and you look at who was the guy in the 90s, and I know this is comic book too, but that's where I know it. Who's the guy in the 90s with who tries to get his hands on that tablet that makes him young again?
Oh, Silverman.
Silverman, yes. Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of that, and I think that's really cool because you've got a teenage superhero who's got his whole life ahead of him, and then he's got he's got all these supervillains that are old and almost jealous of that.
Yeah, exactly. I always like that dynamic, and I think a lot of the X-Men villains have the same sort of thing. Like, all of the villains are like old guys, Yeah. It's kind of like the young generation versus the older one.
Yeah, they're fighting against it. But the nice thing is things are never too black and white in Stan Lee's Marvel stuff. So the youngins aren't always right either.
I agree, and importantly, I think the youngins and the old people are much more similar than they realize.
Oh, yeah.
Like J. Jonah Jameson hates Spider-Man because he thinks he's some sort of glory hound and showboating and trying to get attention. Jameson does the same thing. Like, he says bombastic things in the newspaper to sell them and get attention for his newspaper. Like, he is exactly what he hates about Spider-Man in a lot of ways.
Something I think is cool, and when we're looking at the Now magazine building, which, once again, we were not to the Daily Bugle yet. Mm-hmm. So we've got a J. Jonah Jameson that is publishing a tabloid and almost freely admits that that's what it is. He just publishes whatever comes to mind, and he makes up. And I kind of like that, like, starting with that. This is another thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, this idea that J. Jonah Jameson didn't start out in these comics as pretending to have a legitimate newspaper. Like, it's really not that. I think that's really kind of interesting.
Yeah, he's kind of a man of the sleazy, sensationalistic news media that happens to come and buy a legitimate newspaper and turns it into a tabloid. Nobody really realizes it, which is kind of scary,
Well, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some social commentary there when we get to that, where he actually take it, because this is the last guy on Earth that you want to see take over that newspaper. I mean,
yeah.
And he's just so judgmental. You see Spider-Man do a couple of things that seem like they're for personal gain, and after that, it doesn't matter what he does.
Yeah, he doesn't do any sort of journalism at all. He doesn't know no investigation at all.
Yeah, not even a little bit. Anything else you want to say about this page before we move on?
I don't think so. No.
There will be issues where this format makes, or there will be episodes where this format makes more sense than in other ones.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, here we just kind of have Peter looking at the magazine, typical kind of stuff. Flash Thompson being a two-dimensional bully, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and he gets the idea that, and that's kind of fun that like he's looking at that magazine, and suddenly the teacher is like, well, that's not the kind of thing that you usually do. What's wrong with you, Parker? And it's not that he's doing what these guys are doing. These other kids who are like really anti-intellectual and want to bring down the brains to their level so they don't have to try. And that's realistic. That's still
that happens all the time.
Yeah, I like that. And so anyway, but he's looking at that magazine because he's got this idea, and once again, because he's very slowly learning, and maybe for some people's taste a little bit too slowly, but these read fast. And take place over probably a pretty short amount of time.
Yeah, you get the sense that these issues are kind of like a day in the life of Peter Parker. One day event kind of things.
Yeah, and so I mean, he still has a whole lot to learn. So, I mean, like he's learned a little bit about responsibility, but to his credit, he's still got to think about the day to day. His aunt's not making ends meet. He's got to do something about that. I think it's really funny that he gets the camera, or I'm sorry, he thinks about becoming a photographer, and he's like, I should go take pictures of the Vulture and take them to J. Jonah Jameson. And then he goes home, and I don't think this is intentional, but the way this next panel reads, it's almost like he walks in and Aunt May's like, here's the camera.
Yeah.
Like he hasn't even done, like I think what was intended with this panel, and it could go either way, is that Peter, because it says as soon as school ends, the excited teen rushes home to his Aunt May and is just delighted to learn that she's got the camera. It could be that he walks in and he tells her the story and then she goes and gets the camera,
right.
But the way it reads, it's like he walks in and she's holding it, and I just think that's hilarious.
No, I agree. It is comical. I was thinking the same thing. And I did make the inference like, oh, he probably asked her, and this is just kind of after they had that conversation. But it does appear that, for sure. It is really funny. One of the things you mentioned, I think you made a really good point earlier that I wanted to touch on briefly, was the pacing of the issues and how it's kind of a slow burn. That's I would imagine it'd be a very different experience, I guess, reading these issue to issue. Maybe every month we'd have the Bendis problem where it would feel like it was moving too slow. but reading it all together, I really appreciate how the character changes very slowly, and it kind of speaks to how Brian Michael Bendis, his style fit the character so well when he did Ultimate Spider-Man, when you think about it, because that's exactly what these early comics are in a lot of ways. So yeah, I just thought there was an interesting little thing that you touched on. I think you're right about it. It does move very slow.
Well, I think the difference is with these, you've got an overarching story just in the sense that this is a character who is growing and changing, but not in here's a big master plan.
Right.
It's in the background.
And we'll get to things like that later on, but starting out in these issues.
Right now, they're not so much, but even to the later stuff, the later Stan Lee stuff, still less that way than Bendis, where you read issues that basically feel like a couple of scenes of like a much larger
thing. Sure.
You know what I mean? And Stan Lee is still more or less kind of telling a story issue to issue, even when there's greater stuff going on.
Yes, that's very true. I agree.
I don't think he ever stops doing that.
No, he doesn't. You're right.
But that's this era.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they're like two-parters sometimes, but they feel like an episode of a television, and then it's like to be continued, and then you go to the next part.
Yeah.
So it still feels like a complete story, you know?
It's not like Bendis where it feels like it takes 12 pages or 12 like issues to maybe tell a story that Stan Lee would have done in one.
Right. That's very true.
So then we have the Vulture at the bottom looking kind of goofy. I think it's funny. Just that face. I think it's funny that, because I hadn't really thought about this, looking at these panels together, you've got that picture of Uncle Ben, and then right below it, you've got the Vulture, who looks like he's probably about the age Uncle Ben was when he died.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
You've also got Peter Parker dealing with his Aunt May, and he's only a second supervillain. He's like Aunt May's age. I mean, all I'm saying is there are kind of reasons that people look at this character and don't actually read stories and go, that's silly, he's fighting like this 80-year-old man, you know what I mean?
No, I agree with you on that face. If they only read this stuff, I wouldn't be enthralled with the character either.
Yeah.
And I think if you go back and read this stuff, the parallels that you're talking about are what DeMatteis plays with in those stories. So I think it's all kind of sort of there, but they don't really do anything with it. Like, you go back and read these stories and you notice that he's the same age as Aunt May. Oh, well, maybe we can do something with, Aunt May's perpetually 80 and about to die in most Spider-Man stories anyway, so we'll parallel them, maybe he's about to die, he's 82, and play with him and make it interesting.
Yeah, and maybe you can even look at it as it's just as simple as old people can be villains too. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
like threats can come from any place. All right, we get into the next page, and
Vulture's flying around.
We got Vulture flying around, and we've got and we've got people just really losing their minds about the. I feel like this issue, by the way, plays it almost like there's a big mystery as to how in the world the science works of the Vulture suit, and then it's never resolved. It's just everybody's just talking like, how is that possible? That's amazing. And then it's the same thing as the Chameleon. He's just got a suit that does that. It makes more sense than the Chameleon because I don't know where you compartmentalized all that stuff. but with the Vulture, I mean, like, this comic book logic usually is okay. He's got a suit, it's got wings. Move on. Like, it's okay to be that there are people who are like, wow, I've never seen that before. But the fact that it almost feels like a mystery. We never stop talking about it.
Yeah, they play up two mysteries. The first mystery, they both begin on this page, I think, where Spider-Man's sort of wondering about how the suit works, and we learn later on that has to do with magnetics. And it's also kind of a mystery as to how he's going to steal the diamond because he's so confident about it. He sends in these notes like, haha, I'm going to rob your diamond, and you're not going to know I'm going to do it, and I'm going to get it, and you're not going to know.
He even says, like, I just like toying with my enemies.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the kind of the two mysteries of the character. And it's a little anticlimactic when you get to the end because Spider-Man's like, hey, he just uses magnets, and there's no further explanation. Like, it's not really all that impressive. And then the way that he steals the diamond is he just goes in the sewer.
Yeah, and then Spider's like, even I didn't see that. Well, we'll get there here in a little bit. So now he has his first. This I guess is the first Spider-Man roof confrontation, if I'm not mistaken.
That's very true, and this is the first time we're having Peter Parker take photos while in the Spider-Man suit, obviously, because that's what the main crux of this plot is about. But that's a crucial first.
There are very few Spider-Man issues that I've read that have Spider-Man up on a roof where I don't see a water tower sometplace.
That's very true. That's a very common image in Spider-Man comics.
Yeah, there's a lot, and very often it's used. Like we have it there so that we can tip it over or throw somebody inside of it. And look, we're about to throw somebody inside one.
I remember the Spider-Man '90s animated series had water towers almost on
everywhere. Spider-Man was constantly underwater in that. Is that because I'm reading far too into this when I say this? Is that because people drown spiders? Is that what it is?
I don't know. I never thought about it that way. That's funny though.
Yeah. Me neither, but people do. They drown spiders.
Hydra Man is secretly the deepest Spider-Man villain.
Coming up, Dan, is my favorite page in the whole issue.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, something about the way Ditko is drawing Spider-Man inside this water tower, I think is just really cool.
Ditko does really cool stuff with Spider-Man and water. I mean, obviously, you've probably seen the panel. I think it's from Amazing 31 where he's trapped under all that debris in the water. He has to push it.
Reminded me of that, and I just think it's really dynamic and thrilling, and something about Spider-Man and Death Traps. And I think Spider-Man this early in Death Traps is a little bit more gripping because he's no pun intended, wet behind the ears, and he is he's inexperienced. And I think that Stan Lee does a really good job in this issue of making a lot of it about how Spider-Man is inexperienced, like he's in over his head, and that's partly why he probably started with villains like this that weren't that complicated and were kind of easily defeated, because Spider-Man's got to get luckier. He's going to die, right. like you, and I mean, like, you can say it's convenient, but Stan Lee puts him up against villains like this at the beginning, because if you don't, he's gonna die. Like, we wouldn't believe that he could take out somebody as masterful as even I don't know, even Mysterio this early. I mean, like,
Right.
he needs to get a few of these guys under his belt. And I realize that he's gonna go up against Doc Ock here pretty soon, but he almost gets drowned in this issue, and I like that.
Yeah, and the important thing about Doc Ock too, I mean, we'll talk about that when we get to this issue, but he kind of puts Vulture away at the end of this. He doesn't get as lucky with Doc Ock. Doc Ock's much smarter than this guy.
Yeah. Oh, and we'll have to put a pin in that because we'll have to talk about the implication of Spider-Man is slowly putting guys away and building up enemies.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
That's important. But anyway, I just as far as action goes, I think this is a wonderfully dynamic.
No, I think so
page.
too. I wanted to mention one more thing about the art that you've done because this kind of struck me. This is weirdly another Ultimate Spider-Man thing. That panel with Spider-Man climbing up the wall there in the middle, it looks like a Mark Bagley Spider-Man drawing. The way his face is.
I suppose it does.
I can see a lot of Bagley influence from Ditko looking at this stuff again. It's cool.
So he gets out. Oh, good. Our hero, before he's really become a hero, has not been drowned.
Yes, that's true.
And now it's time for... This is a job for science!
Yes, and this is something that a lot of Spider-Man stories forget. Peter Parker is a really smart guy, and he knows how to tinker. He was able to make amazing devices in his room in high school. I think a lot of writers sort of forget that the character has this side, that he was good at building things and sciencing and things like that.
Yeah, and then sometimes maybe some people go a little bit too far with it.
That's definitely true as well.
Because right now, whether you love it or hate it, you've got a Spider-Man who's running a mega corporation, and people are calling him the poor man's Tony Stark. I mean, you can go too far with it.
Oh, yeah.
And some people maybe like that, but I'm pretty sure you're probably one of those people that is like, Slot, I don't know that you should have had Peter Parker running his own corporate. Although I guess I do sort of like the idea that like when Doc Ock was in his mind, he just like leaves him this corporation when he leaves, and Peter Parker's like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
So I sort of like that.
Yeah, and it's kind of a cool idea to have Peter Parker grow up and further develop as a person, but we could talk about that some other time, maybe if we were.
Yeah, absolutely. When we're old and gray and we're talking about those page for page, and,
oh my god,
and cuts his head off in the middle of a review. But yeah, I think it was almost a stroke of genius from Stan Lee to create a superhero whose superpowers are only half his powers.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what we think about when we think of Spider-Man are things that, as far as what he can do, like you think, spins a web any size. Well, that's not a thing he was born able to do. I mean, the Sam Raimi one was, but or not born. That's not a thing he was able to do because of his spider bite. But I mean, like that's the theme song for this version. Like we think of superpowers as things that are not really superpowers.
Right. Exactly. I mean, one of the things I always liked about the character is that he's the stories that he's involved in and the kind of person he is directly correlated with his character. His personality, what kind of interests he has, things like that. Superman's a character that I find to be interesting, but it's like none of those powers have anything to do with who Superman is as a person, other than like his origin story, right? Like his person. Anyone that often some of the most Superman stories are about someone with a different personality that has his powers, right?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean they can, right, but they're not inherently that way. Absolutely. Yeah, sure.
That's what I've always liked about it. And I think that's why
although you got to give me one though.
Mm-hmm.
The physical strength that parallels strength of character.
Oh yeah, of course. But I think one of the things that people like about Spider-Man and Batman as a character is the things that they're able to do are inherent as to how strong their characters are, right?
Yeah.
Which it's cool. I like that about them.
So another thing that this issue does that I think is kind of fun is it makes a big deal out of exactly how the mechanics of things that Peter Parker puts together so that it kind of builds its own sense of lore, and that's a thing you do for the kids. And I think that's cool. I mean, I think that 88%, I love arbitrary percentages, 88% in my mind of why people love Ghostbusters is the gadgetry.
Oh yeah, it's a large proportion of why I think a lot of people like Batman too, is the gadgetry.
Yeah, so you get to see. I'm not saying there's not a lot more to Ghostbusters than that. I'm just saying that I think for kids, 88% of what kids like, it's gadgetry. It's you got the PKE meter, you got the proton pack. In this we'll come up on a page pretty soon where it spells out for you exactly what things are for on his. But kids eat that stuff up with a spoon.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I love that kind of stuff when I was a kid too. So now we have the first meeting between Peter Parker and J. Jonah Jameson, and it's kind of that. I think this is the first time they've met.
Yes, it is.
And it has that a little bit of that first Sam Raimi Spider-Man thing, where I couldn't read this page without thinking that like I'm not gonna give you a job, I'll give you a Christmas meat.
Yeah, I mean, the Sam Raimi version's a lot more comical because of the characters straight off the page as he was developed over issues and issues in this. Like, he's not taking the photos going, crap, mega crap. You know, it's not that funny.
Mega crap.
Yeah, it's not that funny and classic.
Yeah, well, in
it's
the movies,
it's as indicative of his character.
And so self-aware about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so here he's brought Jameson pictures of the Vulture, and then Jameson's like, maybe you can get some pictures of Spider-Man, and Peter Parker's like, ha ha ha, if only you knew. And he just like he doesn't have any qualms whatsoever about using his powers for personal gain. And what's funny is I don't think that Stan Lee did completely either. Because if you think about it, this is a thing. There's an episode in the first season of Heroes that brings this up, where it brings exactly this up with Spider-Man, Dan, where and I wanted to bring this. I thought this was a good place to talk about it. Where Hiro Nakamura, of course, he has powers to bend time and space, and he has a very childlike view of it, and he thinks of himself as a comic book superhero, and he's trying to be, the perfect superhero, do the right thing. And there's a play, I forget what exactly it is, but there's a situation where he wants to use his powers, or he has to use his powers sort of for personal gain in order to get to the next place where he needs to get to. And his friend, and he's concerned about it. He's like, well, I'm not supposed to do that. And then Ando, his best friend, says, well, is it he says it's cheating. And Ando says, is it cheating when Peter Parker takes pictures of Spider-Man?
Yeah.
And he says, and Hero says, no, I guess it's not. And then he goes through with it and doesn't have a call with it after that.
Yeah.
And I think
that's a really good point. I mean, I've always viewed Spider-Man as kind of the story is inherently about the struggle between self-interest and selflessness, you know? I mean, all of the famous Spider-Man stories are kind of like, Spider-Man saying to himself, is it worth it to do this? Like, am I obligated to sacrifice my personal life and my happiness for other people? Is that something that I should do? Is that a noble end? Because a lot of the time, especially when he's like married to Mary Jane and stuff, it's like, I'm neglecting my wife to go save people that I know nothing about, that could be potentially even bad people, and I'm helping them. Is it even worth it? Am I even making a difference? What would the world be like if I wasn't there?
What does selflessness mean in that situation? Because you're still talking about giving of yourself for another person versus a bunch of other people, so then it becomes kind of, needs of the many and that sort of thing. But in situations like this, it's as simple as how far would you consider it cheating for me to use my powers to take care of myself so I then can take care of other people?
Right.
Like, don't I need to be able to eat, which is what this is about? He's got to make money so that he can eat. Don't I need to sustain myself in order to help people? So is it really selfish, or like how exactly should we look at that, and where do you draw that line?
Right, and I think that's one of the things that I always found to be realistic about the character. I think Spider-Man, people all the time talk about Spider-Man as being realistic because he has problems, and I think they have a point, but they're not articulating it properly.
Well, and it's a little too simplified, right? Yeah. It's not just he's got flaws, it's that he's complicated.
Yeah, and
there's a difference.
I think it's impossible for people to be completely unself-interested. Like, it's not possible to have no interest in yourself at all.
Well, and at the end of the day, if you do, then aren't you in a loopy way then being, I mean, you're not necessarily being selfish, but like, who are you hurting by not taking care of yourself? Because aren't there
only yourself?
Yeah, exactly.
So the ethics of it are all really interesting, and
yeah. Yeah, and
it's
it's
not
just
necessarily talking about any of these things in the story specifically, but it's
not
all there in the
exactly,
themes of the
but
ongoing story.
yeah. Well, we'll move on
Yeah.
then. Okay, so there's a heli. He's got to get to the chopper.
Get to the chopper.
And okay, here's the thing I don't get about this story. I think it's hilarious. Why are we making a big deal on the news, letting everybody know that we're transporting jewels? Like that seems like
it doesn't really make much sense, does it? When you give it any sort of thought, right? Like if you didn't want the jewels to be stolen, you wouldn't announce that it's being delivered at a certain time. You wouldn't have a giant police escort. You just probably put it in one of those armored trucks, drive it to wherever it needs to be, drop it off, and then be the end of the day, right?
There's practically a parade. It's like everybody's coming out to see these jewels.
And it's not even like they're outside. They're in a...
No, I don't know why it's exciting. I think a bunch of people just wanted to get to see guns. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand. I'm really confused about it. And because Peter Parker's like, oh, it would be crazy. I think it's him or somebody. Oh, it would be crazy for the Vulture to try to come get the jewels now because of this big giant crowd that's around. But I'm like, I don't know that that was smart.
Yeah, no, it definitely
Anyway, so that's going on, and then the Vulture is such a genius that he goes down a man.
Actually, I underestimated the intelligence of these people. They're smarter than I thought. They're just walking around with the jewels with a giant armored car escort for some reason.
So he goes under the sewer, and then Peter Parker's like, "Oh my God, I never would have called that."
Yeah.
It's pretty fun. This story is hilarious.
Yes, it is.
The art's nice. I think it's kind of fun to take a Vulture guy and put him under the sewer.
I really like that panel of Vulture in the sewer with the altered colors and the shadows and stuff.
The way the light hits him, yeah. That's pretty cool. And so then Spider-Man's climbing up the wall and making a big deal out of how much he still loves climbing the walls. I mean, Stan Lee is thinking about every part of the evolution of his thought process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I did just get these powers, and it's still new and exciting, and we still do this now, though, where it's like, Peter Parker's like, I can't imagine that I would ever get tired of swinging around.
Yeah, that's the joy of the character. It's something I've always really liked about him. It keeps the story light and sort of optimistic, even when it gets really dark, and I don't know. I like to have a little bit of levity. That's what I think I've always liked about him.
I always appreciate, Dan, characters that think what they're about to do just in case somebody doesn't actually draw it.
Yes, that's true. That's very true.
First, I'll execute a fast loop-the-loop, which will put me behind... Oh, that's what he did. Okay. Because if I just looked at that page... This is one of those rare places where I'm like, well, we didn't draw enough, see, so it's probably... I guess we had to have that. Because the way it looks, it's like, oh, we sort of have it. I mean, like he draws the thing behind... the air behind him, but, I don't know that I would really get looking, the kinetic... of the medium getting, okay, from here to here, he went around him.
Yeah, Stanley probably got the panels and was probably like, wouldn't it be cool if he did a loop-de-loop or something like that? And then it wasn't drawn, so he had to...
Because that's what his voice sounds like even in his own head. He's like, oh yeah, loop-de-loop. Well, actually, when I say it, it sounds like an elderly woman smoking. But, yeah, I'm not going to try to do Dan's... Because what I do, it's like me trying to do a Dan trying to do a Stan Lee. It's not so good. Anyway, so this is where thwarting begins to happen.
Yes. And this dynamic sequence seems to be what Ditko drew on the full-page spread at the beginning of the issue. This is what... Oh!
Good call. Okay, so now we're there.
Yes, that was kind of a preview of this part, showing us the most dynamic part of the issue, which is smart. Good advertising on their part.
I complain all the time, and I'm not going to belabor it here, but I complain all the time about it, especially modern. We do it modern now a lot too, where you take where you go well into the issue, and then we do one page of that, and then we have to spend most of the issue backtracking to it. I like that a thing like this opens with, okay, here's the supervillain, so it gets you excited, but we don't have really any context.
Right,
it's just you just see a picture of it. It's like, here's what you're in for. It's almost like a second cover, and I don't really mind that because it also uses some of that real estate to explain to people what Spider-Man is if they've not read one.
Right, exactly, and it's kind of inherent in the kind of story you're reading. You know, there's going to be a big fight between the hero and the villain. So it's not a spoiler. Like, oh, the superhero and the villain fight. Who knew? You know.
And it's not like you turn to the next page like, oh, I'm bored now because now I gotta waste my time trying to get there. It's like no, I mean, like we're sort of in the status quo where we've been, and you sort of expect that if you've been reading.
And I think Stanley and Ditko felt like they had to do that as well, because you get the feeling all the time Stanley's a little bit insecure about all of the. All of the plot stuff about Peter Parker's life that's in the story. When we go through these issues, you'll see there's always captions like, "Oh, and now back to the action, the exciting part." Like, enough with the boring part of his life. And he's being sarcastic, obviously, but I feel like a lot of the time he has to sell it on the action. Like, "Oh, you're here for the action." We talked about this before a little bit about you're there for the action, but you get some cool character stuff in between.
I mean, some of that probably comes from the way he was like his publisher.
That's very true as well. Yeah.
You know, where he's almost making fun of that mentality where it's like, okay, here's what you came for, kid.
Yeah.
Pay attention. You'll get we'll make you think just a little bit as we're going along, just a little bit. But he's the most colorful. So he's Marvel's most popular character
ever.
That's
okay,
true
so, in that case, actually.
I think this panel at the bottom right, Dan, with Vulture is probably the single reason that people think this is a goofy character.
I can make no defense of the Vulture in this situation. If all he has to say is please no jokes, it's pretty pathetic.
Is this a character that you still really want to see in the movies at some point?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd like to see the Vulture. I mean, there's other villains I'd definitely like to see before him. Kraven is kind of the top one that I'd love to see done in the way that he's done in Kraven's Last Hunt, the kind of dark and twisted way. Now that Marvel has Spider-Man, I don't know that we're ever going to be able to see that, which is unfortunate. But I'd really like to see Mysterio at some point. I really like his powers, and there's some stories in this run actually that are really good with Mysterio. He's a character that's all about mistaken identity and not knowing who you are, which is a lot of what Spider-Man's about too. So I think you could do some cool stuff with a high school Spider-Man Mysterio in that regard.
We talk about Kraven's Last Hunt a lot. This might be fighting words to you, but I want to know what you think of it. I just thought of this. If we think is we kind of tend to that the movies are probably too lighthearted for that. I mean, just the Marvel movies in general, for that story. What if, and it would change the nature of it, but what if we sort of adapted that story in the Daredevil show? Like, what if you took Kraven, put him in Daredevil, and sort of did it there?
That'd be interesting.
Same story. What if you sort of did it there?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of did. Kevin Smith sort of did that with Mysterio. He wasn't adapting a specific story, but he took that character and made him a little bit dark and twisted, and made probably the best Mysterio story I've read. So, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I'd much rather see it done with Spider-Man, obviously. But if I had to choose the Kraven that I like or the Kraven that I don't like, and it's not done as well as I would like, I mean, I'd be fine with seeing him as Daredevil. It's the right characterization, you know?
This is not the place to talk about that, but I just thought...
No, for sure. It's interesting.
Okay, so this is the last page, and everything works out okay, of course, and Peter Parker is having his cake and eating it, too. This is the closest to, a real victory, all the way around that he's had, I guess.
Yeah, and... as with everything in Spider-Man, it's going to come back to bite him, which is good. I like that we're kind of reminded by the last panel here. Everything looks like it's all rosy until you realize, oh, the Vulture's in prison and he's scheming. And he's trying to get out, and he's going to get Spider-Man when he gets out. It's the ticking time bomb, Peter Parker's decisions and the good status quo is only going to last as long as the Vulture's in jail.
And as always, it doesn't always matter what the intentions are. It's not like if Peter Parker had fought him solely because he was doing a bad thing, the same thing might not have also happened.
Oh yeah, exactly.
But the deal is, any way you slice it, Spider-Man is kind of creating arch nemesis. He's creating these villains. Vulture could have been a one and done thing.
Yeah, of course. The Vulture could have stolen that diamond and went away, got his money, and been no problem to society anymore.
doing it? We don't know. Who knows? But I mean, like, they all end up being bigger threats. But then the question always, of course, and there's a lot of this in Batman too, which is why it's so interesting to compare these characters to me. The idea is, yeah, but doesn't he still have to stop them? Like regardless of what might happen in the future, doesn't he still have to? I mean, like, in this particular issue, he's just stealing a diamond. But in other places where you're talking about, we're really threatening people, but don't, in the moment, don't you have that? And that's the responsibility. Doesn't he have to do something? Like, does it matter that it's going to be worse later?
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting question, and I think that's one of the central questions I find to be interesting about the stories, for sure.
Well, now we get to the terrible Tinkerer, and this story is just wild. And Dan, the Tinkerer in this turns out to be an alien that's working with some other aliens, and he's fixing things really cheaply to try to take over the world by controlling people, and it's bizarre.
Yeah, it's a really strange story, and this story was immediately retconned by the Tinkerer's next appearance, too. So Stan Lee and Steve Ditko had the same opinion as us, that it thought it was kind of bizarre, and I find it interesting that the character was ever used again at all, you know?
Yeah, why would you do that? But they've done a lot of stuff with him since then, but he's never been an alien again.
Exactly. So,
wouldn't it have been really funny if Ultimate Tinkerer had just been this guy?
That would have been pretty interesting. Yeah.
That's what I would have done. Now that I've read this, that would have been great. And we're doing this again, where it's like where we've got that full page spread opening this up.
This is a great look at the costume, and I love the way it looks. And rumors are going around now that the Spider-Man costume in Civil War is going to be based on this one completely. It's going to even have the chubby spider logo on the back and the web armpits, and if that happens, I am going to be a very happy person.
Well, we've done so much off the page with Marvel Cinematic, I just feel like they could get away with it.
I think so, too. I'd be so happy if they did that. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, like the rumor about how maybe the eyes are going to be able to change and emote like they do in the comics, too. Oh, that's so cool.
That would be neat. And I mean, like, I don't know that you'll even see raised webbing anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that, but yeah.
I bet they just draw it on now.
That would be.
You know what? Maybe we'll finally get a Spider-Man movie where he could make his suit. I would love that. Because we've still not. I've complained about it too. I am so fixated on it. People, I hate it when I bring that up. Because it's like he's got, especially in the first one where it's like I have this makeshift costume. Well, they do it in both. Where he goes out in like a ski mask and like a makeshift costume, and then he doesn't have any more money than he did before. But suddenly he's got this like amazing tailored, like you and I couldn't pull together the money to make it. Like,
yeah, it's kind of even worse in the first Amazing Spider-Man because the costume looks as if they tried to make it seem as if he could make it on a budget, but it looks way too good. You know, like it's got the sneaker soles on the bottom of it, sort of. It just looks weird.
Yeah. And I don't think you can get away with, well, he's a scientist. I just don't think it works. All right, well, moving right along. So Peter Parker is... I don't even remember what's going on in this scene, Dan.
So Peter Parker is being asked to help this professor out with some experiments because he's friends with the Peter's high school science teacher, and Peter agrees and everyone's making fun of him going to spend his weekend with a professor and do experiments. And he's so smart, in fact, that aliens are trying to view his experiments via some radio device that they rigged on his radio.
That only costs 10 cents to fix because that's not suspicious.
Yeah.
Yep, and then he's like, oh, the Tinkerer Shop. That's a weird name for a thing. You know, when I was reading this, I realized immediately that we were in a weird issue, and all of a sudden there's these just giant green hands that come off of one side of a panel.
Yeah, some of the early Marvel comics are really interesting because it takes a while for them to establish their sort of flavor within the Marvel universe. Because when you see what the Marvel movies is, each character in that Marvel has made movies of, the studios movies, have their own sort of pocket and flavor. Like Thor is high medieval fantasy a lot of the time. Yeah. And Thor has the same sort of thing, like this issue of Spider-Man, actually, where they'll just put him up against aliens and other like random threats. Like the first time Thor shows up, I think he fights aliens in his first appearance, which is really weird. So they haven't really established that Spider-Man's like this street level thing yet, and it's got some science fiction flavor to it, obviously, because his origin is scientific and he builds tech and stuff. So Yeah, you don't see a bunch more alien stories in Spider-Man after this very much. That's
Well, I think some of this might have to do too with the fact. I mean, obviously we're not crossing anything here, but with the fact that Stanley is intentionally putting all this stuff in a shared universe.
right. And the Fantastic Four
So,
is kind of the basis for it, and it's a science fiction space kind of thing.
because we did have several things before Spider-Man.
Yes, that's very true.
So we're already building a universe. So we've already established that there are aliens, and you notice that Peter Parker is not really all that surprised when he learns what it is. I mean, like he's surprised because it's weird, but it's like there's aliens from another planet. It's not like, oh my god, there's aliens. Like I'm surprised those exist.
Right, and culturally in the 50s and 60s, aliens were, something that people in the United States were thinking about with, like, Roswell happened in the 50s and things like that. So it's kind of in vogue to be talking about these sort of things along with...
We also shouldn't be surprised that he's mixing genres so much, because what he was working on before this, and before he got to do Spider-Man, was, of course, Amazing Fantasy, which was a pulpish horror sci-fi thing. Yeah. And so it's interesting that after that namesake, just the second issue of Amazing Spider-Man, he's bringing some of that to this.
That's very true, yeah. And the Tinkerer is the weirdest looking man of all time.
Well, you know what's weird? Two really elderly bad guys.
That's true, yeah. Issue. I didn't really think about that, but it's plainly obvious. That's interesting.
I don't know if that was a conscious choice, but
I think it had to have been.
Yeah.
It's funny that the Tinkerer only charges a dime to fix radios. Dimes are useless pieces of change now. You can't buy anything with them.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and obviously it's really suspicious even then. Yeah. And you're like, well, I guess you can dismiss it because this guy's an alien and he doesn't know anything. And, but obviously, he even says that he makes it really cheap so that he can try to get everybody to go there. What I thought was really funny is there's somebody who's like, well, of course I took my radio there because he's really super cheap. I'm like, just remember, you get what you paid for most of the time.
Yeah, the Vulture, comparing the Vulture and the Tinkerer schemes is kind of interesting because the Vulture is like trying to steal stuff from people, and the Tinkerer is scamming people, but not even really scamming people. He's like rigging their devices with something he can use to gather information. He presumably still fixed the radio and it works.
Yeah,
he's providing a service for people really cheap. It's kind of helpful.
Yeah, but but they're paying more than they thought they were. Yeah, exactly. Information from them. Yeah, he's that would actually be a really good scheme for identity theft.
It's true. I think we can classify the Tinkerer as necessary evil. We need to repair, man.
I like Spider-Man in these like kind of spooky haunted house type settings.
I do too. I always like when they blend the blue parts of the costume in with the black surroundings, and you just see the red. It's really cool looking. Yeah,
that's awesome. There's a lot of neat atmosphere and stuff there. Explain to me why it's made a mystery as to why the fact that the Tinkerer is also an alien. I don't understand why that's a reveal. Like he's standing around with these aliens and he's constantly wearing that mask, and then at the end, and it's not even a reveal. It's like a throwaway thing where it's like, oh, by the way, like right at the end, it's like, oh, by the way, he was an alien, and I'm like, why is that a thing? Like I don't like it seems like the place you'd reveal it would be like here. You know what I mean? It's like Peter Parker has dealt with the guy, and then later on he's like, while he's hanging out with these guys, he's like, oh my god, this mask is so hot.
Yeah, it would have been more of a reveal if, like, all the other aliens were wearing masks too, and then you find out, oh, they're aliens at the very end or something. I don't know.
Yeah, like, I feel like this would have been a lot more interesting if they had just found this guy and he was like, yeah, I hate humanity, screw those people. like, I'm going to help these aliens. Like, it would have been a lot more interesting if he was really just an old guy and he was, like he is later when they immediately retcon it. Like, this could have been the real Tinkerer, and he could have just been helping aliens, and then later on, we just use them again.
He could have been like Spider-Man's Poison Ivy, where he's just like, I like radios more than I like people, and I am going to destroy humanity so it can be ruled by radios.
I think it might have been more. Well, but like I don't know. I shouldn't do this. I'm just thinking of cool things you could do with it. Like what if they offered him like alien technology he could play with?
That's true. Yeah.
Something like that. You want to try to keep comparing it to the Vulture's plot? So now, action!
Yes, we got some action aliens fighting Spider-Man, which is pretty cool. We get the Tinkerer shaking his fist at Spider-Man.
Yeah, he's no ordinary Earthling. He's Spider-Man. Get him. I think that's a tip-off, maybe, that he's like, because when I read that, I was like, is he an alien? And then at the end, they didn't show him as an alien, and then Spider-Man is throwing a line where he's an alien, and I'm like, boy, I could have missed that really easily.
Yeah, I think on the page, I don't remember them showing him take the mask off the Tinkerer either.
I don't think they ever do.
We'll see it when we turn to the page, but I remember looking at the page and not noticing where in the artwork he actually grabbed the Tinkerer's face and took the mask. He just kind of like, at the end, he's like, oh, I get this mask. It's strange.
Yeah, yeah. The nice thing is, we're looking at each page, so we'll know.
Yeah. I was mentioning earlier the part in the Vulture issue where we got a little preview into the fight, and the panel we see there with the Tinkerer shooting Spider-Man in the back is, again, the minimized version of the spread at the beginning, which is cool.
It's a great point. It's really easy to forget that while you're reading it because it's such a throwaway panel. Like, you just kind of read over it. I mean, it's a really cool dynamic panel, but it's neat that it's... And I mean, I don't think it's blown up, right? It's not exactly the same picture?
Yeah, it's Spider-Man getting shot in the back. He looks a little bit different, but it's kind of the same moment.
It's kind of neat. And then he puts him in a dome of Resisto glass.
And the Tinkerer, you can blatantly tell it's a mask because it doesn't look like he has eyes.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. But see, in a comic book, I wouldn't just assume... Oh, you know what's really neat about that?
What?
You can see how it's draped over the shape of the alien face. Because in that panel, it shows you the alien face right next to him, and you can see how the alien faces have that too. It's like they don't have eyes. And so you can see how it's like the same shape. That's really cool.
You know how you were saying earlier that the first issue of Amazing Fantasy reminded you of an episode of something like The Twilight Zone with a no-hint?
Yeah.
I mean, this story reminds me of that a lot.
This has that too, and if you think about the fact that we've only had one issue in between, it makes a lot of sense that we haven't exactly landed on the tone like you were talking about, and why we still might go back to that kind of thing. But you'd think this would have more of an O. Henry ending then.
Yeah.
It's not just, we took his mask off. Yeah, it's a little... Both of these have that in common, where they're a little bit anticlimactic. Yeah. And so he's in a bubble thing. He looks funny in the bubble.
So I think it's cool that the designs that Ditko has for a lot of the Spider-Man tech have survived and still look exactly the same in a lot of things. Like, that design for the web shooter is exactly the design that's still used for everything Spider-Man, pretty much, outside of the movies, really. Like, in the 90s animated series, that's what they looked like. His belt looked exactly like the belt that we saw earlier Spider-Man putting on.
Wasn't that far away in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, was it?
Yeah, it didn't look all that different, but it didn't look exactly the same either.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have that big glowing red thing that the first movie had on them.
You know, something else we haven't talked about is that he still has that thing where his spider sense lets him sense specifically whatever's going on in the issue, so that he can know stuff.
Yes,
we've got that working pretty hard here with, like, I forget if it's radio waves or what exactly it was, but there's a bit earlier on where he's like, I'm sensing a thing.
Yeah, he could sense that there was some sort of technology in the radio that wasn't going off when it was turned.
Yeah. That's right. Well, he did the same thing with the Vulture wings. He could specifically recognize that there was no engine.
That's true, yeah, which is weird.
Yeah, it does whatever Stanley wants it to do.
You fool! You jarred my arm. I've destroyed our control panel.
Why do we review these? Why don't we just read them down? You can be all the aliens and the Tinkerer, and I'll be Spider-Man.
And then one of them will sound like Stanley every issue.
Yeah, well, no, you just do that for Jameson. And then we have a fire, because you got to have a fire.
Yeah, Spider-Man and fire is kind of a thing that happens a lot.
Spider-Man and water, Spider-Man and fire, really just the original elements, really.
Yeah, that's true.
Very elemental superhero. I don't know what that means.
And then he's outside in the air. See, we're getting
Yeah, all we need now is wind and heart.
Yeah.
And then we've got the Planeteers. Okay, well, anything else you want to talk about this? We're just action, and he runs up on the roof, And we do have at the end of this page somebody saying, maybe Spider-Man started the fire. We've got to always perpetuate this idea that people don't trust Spider-Man and that he made some mistakes early on.
Right.
And so even when he's trying to do the right thing now, people don't. And I think it's really important to continue to look at that as Spider-Man screwed himself at the beginning. If he had started off as a real, honest-to-God superhero at the beginning, he probably wouldn't have this problem.
Right. Exactly.
And then there's a spaceship! Oh, and I like the guy who's like, nobody would believe me, so I'm not gonna tell them about the spaceship I saw. He goes, what? I'm a fool! Obviously it was in my imagination.
Yeah, he says people would just think I'm an absent-minded professor if I start talking about aliens and stuff. And I just thought it was really funny, because it's like, yeah, nobody wants to trust experts. Like you were saying earlier, that thing where it's like, we gotta make everyone get on our level, drag us down to our level. Nobody's gonna believe smart people.
Yeah, because it means that they have to admit that they're not as smart, and we can't have that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It hurts everybody. This really seems to be like the issue where Peter Parker interacts with old people. I don't know if there's anything to that, but then we have this professor guy who's like, it's all the super, like all I can do is look at this and go, old person, old, this is basically our new series is counting old people.
Yeah, so there's the mask. I never saw him pull that off of Tinker's face.
I don't know how he got it. How did he get it?
I don't know.
How did he get it? Let's roll back a second, see if we can see any place where. Okay, so he jumps at him in the fire, Dan.
Yeah.
And then we see them in silhouette fighting.
Okay, so that's probably where he got it then.
And that must be where he got it, but we don't really.
We never see his right hand there. See how it's covered?
Yes, it's always cut, and then in that last panel, it's off panel. So it's almost like for some reason we're not supposed to know he's got, it's a reveal that he's got the mask, and it's like, that's what I'm saying, is that it's so weird that that's supposed to be revealed. It's like, look, he was actually an alien all along, and I'm like, I don't know why that's a big deal, and I don't know why he didn't take that mask off earlier. I don't understand.
Yeah, it's very weird.
This is a weird issue all the way around.
Not the crowning achievement of Stan Lee and Stephen Goes Around on Spider-Man, but
it's fun.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it. We spent far too much time on it.
No, it was fun though.
We talked about many other things. Remember that this is a discussion show about Spider-Man where we're using this as the foundation of our discussion, and then other things are likely to arise as we continue.
Exactly, because most of the time when you get me talking about Spider-Man, I won't shut up. So
That's true. No, I know that about you. You're like Eric with Iron Man armor. I'm just kidding.
But the difference between us in that regard is Spider-Man is interesting. Iron Man.
Oh, don't be like, I'm gonna send this.
I know. I'm just kidding.
This is the part where we made fun of you, and he'll be like, "Oh, okay."
I'm just
kidding,
anyway. Of course.
Everybody, thanks as always for watching Spider-Man Page by Page. Did you have anything else you wanted to mention about this before we move on? I feel like we sort of dissected it beyond to a point of absurdity, really.
Nothing I can think of other than the Vulture is cool. I like him.
Yeah, we're not using this as an example.
Right. Yes.
But yeah. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing the part where Vulture is cool when we get there.
Well, we're going to have to start a Spectacular Spider-Man page by page and get 180 issues into that about, so.
Well, maybe after we've said everything there is that we want to say, we'll get to a point where these are a lot shorter, because we're like, no, shut up, we've said that already.
That's true, yeah.
Well, anyway, thanks again for watching, folks. We sure appreciate it. We'll see you again next time on Spider-Man Page by Page. I am Captain Logan!
And I have been Dan.
See you later.